It is back to school, and that means back to fall sports. Teens at Shawnee Mission East High School are up and at it this morning. They are already hard at work. We are talking physical and mental health for athletes this morning on the Morning Medical Update. And good Friday morning to everyone. It is August 19th. I'm Jessica Lovell, and we are live here inside the Dolph C. Simons Jr. Family Broadcast Studio. Two high-profile cases of COVID in the news right now. First Lady Dr. Jill Biden and Pfizer's CEO, Dr. Dana Hawkinson, weighs in. He also has our COVID count and more on our monkeypox cases and what we know so far. Our number one topic today is all things youth sports. Dr. David Smith, Medical Director of the Youth Sports Medicine Program, is here with me here in studio. You also serve as the Kansas State High School Activities Association Sports Medicine Advisory Committee. Did I get that right?
You got it right.
Oh, gosh, I was nervous about that. Okay. We are anxious to hear their new guidelines, some really important stuff there around COVID and concussion and heat-related issues. So you want to stay tuned for that. And then also we are live at Shawnee Mission East High School this morning with athletic trainer Dakota Orlando and Doug Wiesner, Director of our Athletic Trainers and Youth Sports Medicine Program for the health system. So glad to have everyone with us today. And of course, we want to hear from you out there. What is on your mind? You can send us your questions on the chat thread or via email. The links to those are right there on your screen. In the U.S., about 30 million children and teens are involved in some form of organized sports. The National Safe Kids campaign and the American Academy of Pediatrics found there are more than 3.5 million injuries, though, each year. The most common, sprains and strains. Nearly 800,000 children ages 14 and younger are treated in hospital ERs for more serious sports-related injuries. Dr. Smith, we know that the great football coach Vince Lombardi once said that football is not a contact sport, it is a collision sport, and we know that that holds true for a lot of sports out there. So let's start with concussion, those collisions. The state committee that you serve on for high school activities called CASHA, that's for short, they are very serious, as we know, about concussion and what we know about that. They have a 6-step process for students who have suffered some type of concussion to return to play. Let's talk about those guidelines, if they've changed, and I want to talk about those 6 steps.
Yeah. You know, Jessica, they've not changed a lot. What we're finding, though, with the COVID pandemic was we just didn't have as many concussions. There was less participation, and so we have been tracking concussions throughout the state of Kansas for years now. And we obviously noticed that number go down with the participation rate going down. But we still, we didn't want to just focus on COVID because concussions still happen. And, you know, football always gets picked on because of it's a collision sport. But actually, per participation rate, cheerleading has more concussions per the number of participants.
I've heard that.
So, and then you, of course, heard of things like soccer with girls soccer having more than boys. So we're tracking those numbers. And we're actually asking all athletic trainers to report this so we can keep good, accurate data across the state. But the return to play is still the same. Remember, in the state of Kansas, it's mandated that someone with a concussion must be cleared by an MD or DO to go back to sport. And then we start what's called the 6-step return to play. The first step being just try to get them moving, and then all the way up to adding more aerobic type exercise, and then strength training, then more sport specific drills. And as long as they don't have any symptoms, and this is after they've been cleared by a physician, then we can take them all the way up to where they start having contact in their practices. And then of course the 6th step is full return to play.
So the 6th, I just want to make sure I heard you right, the 6th step comes after.
Yeah, they must be cleared, absolutely, they must be cleared.
Then you put them through the 6 steps.
Yeah, and in my practice, there's times that I may start them exercising, they may still have a little headache or fatigue, but I'll let them do a little more activity because studies are now very clear that returning to some type of exercise actually helps the brain heal more quickly. Yet, we want 0 symptoms before they start bumping into each other, so to speak.
You mentioned football. Does it, the bad rap that it gets, does it deserve it?
Yeah, you know what? Football does not deserve that bad rap. I think there's so many things that are being done. In fact, this year with the NFL, they're requiring at certain positions in training camp, you'll see a special helmet that helps reduce that potential in training camp. And so the NFL's looking at it. That trickles down into youth sports. But no, I don't like to see football get picked on. Obviously, they've got techniques for tackling. You know, the head down position is wrong. The head up position is correct. You're still going to have incidental contact where you don't see a blow coming, and it cannot just be a direct blow to the head. It can be a blow to the body that kind of whips the head and neck, and that type of rotational force on the brain can cause concussion too.
Yeah, you don't see the pads
So,
and
but you
helmets in
think
soccer.
about, yeah, you think about cheerleading and some of the pyramids they're doing, and they might be a flyer where they're coming down and the baser doesn't catch them well, and they smack their head on the baser's arm or something, and that can cause that. I hate to see it, but I've seen some non-contact sports like track and field get concussion when they're messing around with a hammer throw. The distance runners, and the hammer comes around and hits them in the head. That should never happen in a practice. So no, let's not pick on football, but it is obviously with the high participation rate,
Sure.
it's going to get the high profile reports of things that happen.
It just, when I hear you say, I cringe just hearing you tell the stories of the different type of injuries. So
Yeah.
can't imagine it. It's something that really concerns parents. But there is a new tool in the toolbox, which is good news. The health system is working with athletic trainers and schools to implement this SWAY program. It's designed as a balance and cognitive testing mobile device. Tell us a little bit about what this is.
We're excited about this. We have been investigating it for a couple of years and implemented it just this past year. In fact, we've just completed, as the season starts here in the fall, over 1,400 baseline tests. And SWAY is a program that can be done on a mobile device, a phone or an iPad or device that we can measure balance in addition to some of the neurocognitive functioning. What we've done in the past, and we're not throwing it out, but we've used neurocognitive testing to check memory and visual speed and reaction time. But now we can actually add balance to that, because many times with concussion, the vestibular system is altered. And so we can do testing now to where they hold their cell phone and they can do these balance tests. But we can also still do visual reaction time and things that are cognitive. So it's a combination of balance and cognitive, which can be done at the school too. In fact, we have them, they can be in the gym with their cell phones and they can go through their baseline testing. We prepare a report, and that it goes with them, so that if they had a head injury, then we can compare the SWAY testing to the baseline. No
So
different than what we were
literally
doing.
SWAY.
It literally is balance, but it's not just balance. It's visual reaction time and memory. And
How were you
things.
testing, though, before this
Yeah.
type of program?
Well, what we've done is we've asked all of our high school athletic trainers to implement it this year. Now, it is voluntary. The schools that we contract with, we say we are going to offer it. We're not going to mandate it. We ask them to encourage their athletes to do it, especially in the high-risk sports like football and cheerleading and soccer. And our athletic trainers have worked really hard out in the field early or end of the spring and early into the fall to get them into the gym or after school into a classroom and get them to do this SWAY testing. So then that stays in their record, and in case they have an injury, they can come in. And the athletic trainer, the cool thing for me as a physician, we can do it in the office, but what I like is I can monitor the progress of an athlete at the school by seeing this SWAY testing.
Very
so when
cool.
they come in to me, then I've got testing, or the athletic trainers can email me that same information. It may be a way that I don't have to see them quite as often in the office, but I can be monitoring their progress. So we're very excited about this. Obviously, we'll track it. We'll see how many we do, the utility of it. But it's not just a brand new system. It's been validated. FDA approved.
Let's talk about something that concerns a lot of parents. I know students rough their way through this heat, but Keisha has new guidelines when it
Yes.
comes to heat. Tell us about those.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure we hit on that today because we worked really hard on this. You know, in the past we would use temperature and sometimes humidity, and we do a heat index, and we try to figure out when practices should be altered based on that. Well, this year we are using the wet bulb globe temperature, WBGT. Basically, it's a device that can measure a combination of ambient temperature, humidity, wind speed, cloud cover, sun, and it can be done right there at the field where they're going to be practicing. We're asking the athletic trainers to get a wet bulb temperature, and so they can determine 30 to 60 minutes before practice and let the coach know, okay, today we're in the red zone, so we're going to have to alter it this way. We basically have a green, we have yellow, we have orange, we have red, and we have black.
So
the
they may
black
shorten
zone
it?
is, yeah, they might shorten the practice, they may require more breaks, they may not go in pads that day based on the wet bulb. And the coaches have bought into this, the athletic directors, and actually the district athletic directors are responsible for letting everybody know, okay, today it looks like the wet bulb temperature is at 88. That's going to put us in the red zone. That means you're going to have very limited practices. This also can be done indoors. You know, some of these gyms can be awfully hot. So there's no sun, obviously, but the humidity can be very high.
It's muggy.
Yeah, and so it's neat because there's a grant that has allowed all high schools across the state of Kansas to have access to this device. We actually had it before the grant came through because we felt it was important. But now there's no school in the state of Kansas that should not have the access and be able to determine the proper training that day, what they can do.
So Dr. Smith, I know you do what you do because of some of your previous experiences. I'm going to ask you about some of your injuries in a little bit, but
Okay.
But back in the day, not that far back, Dr. Smith.
That's a long time
that
ago.
far back, but you ran, and
Yeah.
you said that they didn't care how hot it was outside, that you would run twice a day.
Yeah, no, we started cross-country practice, and we had 2 weeks of two-a-days. We ran at 7:30 in the morning, at 4 or 4:30 in the afternoon. We did 10 miles, basically averaged 10 miles in the morning, 10 miles in the afternoon.
And nobody checking the temperature.
Nobody checking temperature. You know, obviously we're hot. They provided water, but it was when the coach said we were having a water break, not when we were thirsty.
Right.
And we actually back then thought, well, you know what, if you drink too much water, you're going to get one of those side stitches, so don't drink too much. I guarantee you there were times that we'd finish a practice in that heat and we'd go into the locker room with air conditioning and we would just suck down water. We'd be lined up at the water fountain. And back then they even had a box taped on the lockers with salt tablets in them. You could grab a handful of those. I mean, we didn't have any science
So this was
behind
the
that.
rub dirt on it thing.
Yeah, and it really was. You just felt like if you can't tolerate it, you're not tough enough to run cross country.
Okay. I'm glad things have changed.
Yeah, it was stupid. Surprisingly, we didn't have a lot of problems, or at least we didn't recognize. We might cramp or we might get a little dizzy. I'm sure there were times we had heat exhaustion, and somehow we survived, and I don't know how that happened. But obviously we've gotten a lot smarter, and we don't do that anymore.
All right, well, even with the best precautions, we know that at some point student athletes could still get hurt. How do we know if an injury needs to be seen by a doctor, or and certainly if a athlete needs to go to the ER?
Yeah, you know, I think let's go back to concussion because that obviously is a potentially very serious injury. And if there are symptoms that are suggestive of concussion, they really need to be seen. Do they need to go right to the emergency department? We say not unless you're seeing them decline quickly. So if they've got a headache and a little dizziness, that doesn't necessarily mean ER. But it needs to be seen, preferably, I say, within 48 to 72 hours. The ideal time is within 48 because you can see symptoms that will slowly evolve with time. But if someone gets hit in the head or hit in the body and that whips the head and they start having severe headaches, they start throwing up, you know, they're not as responsive as the parent might expect, that's to the emergency department. It's very important. We don't see that often. And interesting, loss of consciousness is not always the main thing that we look at. Some people can lose consciousness for a few seconds after concussion, and that doesn't necessarily mean trigger an ER visit. But it's very important to monitor them after.
And you're not
that.
taking chances, though, right?
No, you take no chances with that. The other things you mentioned, the common injuries are strains and sprains and contusions. I have an old adage, I say, a 3-day rule. So if you get hit or you twist your ankle and it swells up and you can put some weight on it and you put ice on it, obviously if we've got some skilled athletic trainers, we want them to take a look at it. But it doesn't necessarily mean it has to run right off to the emergency department. But it should resolve over the next few days. If you can't bear weight on it the next day or you've got obviously some deformity as you look at that joint, then that deserves obviously an urgent care or emergency department visit.
All right, we have put a bit.ly link on the screen for you to access more information about our sports medicine program here at the health system and all sorts of things that it offers for you and your family and your student athlete. If you're joining us via podcast, that link is bit.ly/MMU Sports. So check that out if you want more information. Well, besides mom and dad, athletic trainers seem to know when athletes need a break or any type of medical attention. The University of Kansas Health System has certified athletic trainers at 13 area high schools and 14 middle schools, and that is where we find Alexis Del Cid live this morning at one of those schools, Shawnee Mission East. Alexis, these athletic trainers are based at these schools and know these athletes really well, right?
Oh, they know these athletes so well. I'm here with Doug and with Dakota. I was just talking with Dakota here at Shawnee Mission East High School. This is the advanced weightlifting class where all the varsity athletes come from all the different sports at the beginning of the day and lift weights. And Dakota was saying she personally knows every single one of these faces, which brings me to my first question for Doug. When you say these trainers are in the schools, they're really in the schools. How does this make a difference with their well-being?
Well, you can see behind us, sports is now in the high school environment a 12-month proposition. It doesn't stop in the summertime and everybody goes away and she has 3 months off. This continues, and in our sports environment, it typically starts August the 1st and then continues to go until Memorial Day. And so that's when the calendar of events stops, but camps start up in June. And so they're here in June. July is really their only time that it settles down a little bit, but they still have events going on in July. So they're here all the time. Injuries don't stop.
Right.
Injuries continue to happen, whether you're doing weightlifting. I can't tell you how many times she has sent over referrals, hey, they dropped the weight on the foot, you know, this, that. So they never stop. So it's important to have an athletic trainer.
Dakota, when it comes to preparing these students for the sport they're going to play, what advice and what guidance do you give them over those summer months? And then what about the athlete who maybe is coming from a school or a junior high or new to a sport and they haven't done training over the summer? How do you guide them?
So for those who come over the summer, we always tell them, make it a commitment. If you're able to be here and like work it around your family vacations, be here. Make sure you give like 100%. Try to get better on something each day so that you can improve. For those who don't come during the summer because they can't or they just moved, it's one of those things where you tell them like, you're going to be a little bit behind because everyone's faster, stronger than you, but you have to commit. Like you can stick it out and you will catch up. And also look to your like upperclassmen or those who have been here and ask them questions, befriend them so that you feel like you can step into that role if you need to.
If you're a parent and you have a teen or a kid who's really into one sport, you might have heard people talk about single sports athletes. Mm-hmm. What's your take on a single sport athlete at a young age?
So I think that's actually pretty, we like to say like detrimental to them because it's overuse and they burn out a lot faster. So an athlete who starts at a young age, they're going to be done with their sport by high school, college. They're mentally done, they're physically done. Their body breaks down, they can't handle it anymore. So it's one of those things we really advise you to do multi-sports. You don't do them all in the same season, try to spread them out. And when you are off, do active recovery. So let your body rest and rebuild.
Speaking of recovery, Doug, what do your trainers do in their off time? Do they get an off season? You mentioned there's a brief period during the summer, but how do you rest them? How do you rest Dakota?
You know, they do get an off time, and I encourage them, get away. Get away, because on August the 1st, it's a long 11 months that you're going to go through. Yes, there's some built-in times, dead week in November, Christmas week, the state shuts everything down. But they need to get away, because you can see this is Dakota and there's 30, 40 kids in here, and this fall alone you'll have close to 300 student athletes.
I had 700 try out this week.
700?
Yeah.
So
700.
Yeah. So they need to get away, right? And so we encourage them. Dr. Smith and I, you want to go to Paris, France in July for 3 weeks? Go. Get away. Do whatever you need to do. And she's a big traveler.
You're
That's
going to
why
send
I
her
say
to
that.
Paris next summer?
Well, I'll talk to Charlie about that. But yeah, we want them to get away because it's a drain on them too. I need them. Dr. Smith and I need them to be at their peak when this thing starts August the 1st, and this thing's going to go until June 30th for them.
I want to ask you about mental health. Mental health is so important, and there's a special training coming up in September. In fact, it's the largest mental health in-service in the nation. This is for teachers and staff where they're going to be working to develop a student mental health plan for their needs. It's called the Mental Health First Aid Training, and I think we all know first aid when you drop a weight on your toe, but what does mental health first aid look like?
So this is a development thing that we actually started 3 years ago. And so we went to one of our athletic trainers, did a master's on it, and said, this is important. We need to include this in our toolbox. And so we started this 3 years ago and then got sidetracked because of COVID. And so last year we picked it back up. We developed an action plan similar to our physical emergency action plan when you drop a weight or somebody gets hurt on the field. There's an emergency action plan to take care of them. And so we developed the same thing for mental health because we know that this is a growing crisis among our student athletes. And she has to be prepared for this. And we want to make sure that she's prepared for this. And so this is the meeting on September the 6th is the biggest one with the coaches and the student athletes or the school administrators, the athletic trainers and what have you in the nation. And so we're very proud of that, but it's something that we need to make sure is in place. And we're working with all of our partner schools to put one in place to get this going and up and ready really quick. So, and the health system has a great behavioral health department. Tanner Funk does a great job with his videos. I just sat in on a QPR video last week, got some great information from that. So we have our athletic trainers sit in on those videos, take certain courses from the health system so that they can go out there and they can recognize certain situations. They're not the behavioral expert.
Right.
They are going to recognize it and refer.
The first line of defense.
They're the first
to
line
open
of
that
defense.
line of communication.
Right.
We have so much more to cover out here at Shawnee Mission East High School, and I know there are parents, grandparents, and other caregivers watching that have a lot of questions about these topics. So get those questions into us. We love questions from our viewers. We will answer those throughout this program. Jessica, I'm going to send it back to you in the studio.
We'll check back with you in a few moments. Dr. Smith, we have a community question that I'm pretty sure you can answer. So Diana wants to know, we scheduled a sports physical with our pediatrician. What questions should we be asking?
Yeah, I think that the sports physical obviously is required. And after May 1st, you can start getting those sports physicals. First of all, I tell parents, get your athletes in after May 1st. Don't wait till August 14th, 15th when practice starts. That's a hard thing to deal with if they have something. But the questionnaire, if you look closely at it, the historical questions are very important. We say that over 60% of problems that we may have to deal with are on the history. You don't have to do the exam. So yeah, parents should need to, I like a sports-specific sports physical. So if they're a baseball player, yes, we pay attention to the heart, lungs, and the general medical part of it. But then we ought to focus a lot on upper extremity things because that's where the potential injuries will occur. But being honest with that physical too, some people just kind of draw a line through all the no questions thinking, let's just get this done. Whereas there may be something really important in the family history with a parent or a grandparent who died at the age of 35 with a heart condition that might trigger us to be looking a little bit more closely at something. So, I hate to pick on physicians. Sometimes I think the sports physical is like, oh good, it's just a sports physical. I can get this done in 10 to 15 minutes in my office. When in reality, a good sports physical may take a little bit longer. The routine ones may go in 10 minutes, but there may be something to look into. So don't be afraid to ask your doctor specific questions. Hey, I noticed my son or daughter is sleeping a lot more than normal, or seems to, they're on their knees breathing hard where the other athletes are not. It's okay, because athletes many times don't want to say something for fear that they'll be kind of put in that corral of, oh, you're not tough enough.
Right.
Yeah.
I thought we were past that, but we're just not yet.
I don't think we're completely past that. Yeah.
All right. So, Dr. Smith, we talked about this early on, COVID, when this all began, about the need for kids to be back in school playing sports so that they're back with their friends, and just the mental aspect of that. We also know that both kids and adults have suffered a lot emotionally and mentally, of course, during this pandemic. What other ways is the health system focusing on mental health for students? And then how is Keisha getting involved? I know we mentioned the mental health first aid training. Alexis did just a moment ago, but talk to us about
Yeah, we are concerned about mental health issues. They continue to increase. COVID caused an exponential rise in depression, anxiety, some of that because of the isolation, not being able to go to school or participate in sports and other activities. So what's happening this year is actually quite exciting. all of our districts that we're working with, one in particular, have implemented an actual structured, we're calling it a mental health, almost like an emergency action plan. You know, with an injury on the field or a bad C-spine injury, we have an emergency action plan where everybody jumps in and does something. Well, we need the same thing with the administrative staff, the coaches, the parents, the experts, counselors in the schools, to be ready to handle if they recognize a student athlete that might be struggling with especially depression, suicidal ideations. So this year, actually one of the districts on September 6th is having a formal program to educate all those interested parties and those that are going to be dealing with student athletes, including our athletic trainers, on this mental health program. And other districts have also adopted this program, and it's really cool because CASHA has been working on this also, Kansas State High School Athletic Association. They have produced a five-part video service that people can log into, Kansas State High School Athletic Association. They were done very well by Dr. Annie Weiss, who's a sports psychologist and director of the wellness program for the Kansas State University Athletic Department. And Annie did a great job with obviously others participating. They're only anywhere from 5 minutes to 20 minutes. They cover things like a coach's perspective, an athlete's perspective. They deal specifically with anxiety. Depression is another video. And then how to implement a mental health program for the school. So it's a great video. I think parents really ought to look at it too. There's 5 of them. It's easy. I think the total, I think if you spend an hour, you can cover most of them. And it's across the state of Kansas, because some schools out in the state don't have this structured program like we're trying to implement here. But that doesn't mean that those athletes out there are not not important. And we are really focusing on this with our athletic training staff so they can recognize someone that maybe is a little bit quiet at practice, withdrawn, maybe doesn't show up for a few days, and they wonder what's going on. Because again, we're saying that it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to bring that to someone's attention.
And sports has been such a good touch point to see how kids are doing.
Yeah, see, that's what's so, way back in the COVID, I kept saying we got to get people into things again. Because that's how we recognize if they're struggling. If they're, and I'm not going to pick on video games, but if they're sitting in front of a video game by themselves and they're depressed, who knows how they're really feeling? But if a coach recognizes that, or athletic trainer, or teacher, or school counselor, someone says something's going on in Susie's life, we need to be okay to bring that up, and we need to say it's okay to bring that to attention of a professional. I've always said identify 3 people. A close friend, a family member, someone you trust at school. So you know that if you're struggling emotionally, it's okay to go to them and say, I need help.
Just 3 people.
And you know, they just started, you've probably seen nationally, the 988, like 911. It's an emergency phone number. You can call 988 if you're struggling with an emotional health issue. And you'll get a professional on the line that will guide you through how to take care of that. I think it's a great program.
Thank you for bringing that up. And I have a couple more mental health questions. I do want to turn to COVID now. Just before we get to Dr. Hawkinson, I just want to ask you any changes or recommendations regarding COVID and these kids being back together? Yeah,
our Sports Medicine Advisory Committee chose, as of right now, today, not to change what we had in place last spring.
Which was? Which
is that COVID, if a student athlete has COVID, they need to be cleared. We actually came up with an addendum on that it doesn't necessarily have to be a physician that gives the final clearance, but if they do have symptoms that are prolonged, if they are having any struggles, especially as they start to exercise again, and we have that same 5 stages in place, that when they come back from COVID, they need to start exercising after they've been cleared, and slowly increase that exercise, and any symptoms that crop up, shortness of breath, chest pain, dizziness, anything, they need to get that checked out. So we haven't changed it, but I'm going to defer to Dr. Hawkinson too. He may comment on this because he's the expert. With some of the new CDC guidelines that have come out recently, I think we need to look at it again. But I still claim that we're not going to change a lot to return to play, because with any illness, with any injury, as you come back to sport, it's important not to just jump off the couch and go right back to full participation. It's good to do what we call a functional progression, and I think that's most important with concussion and COVID, actually.
Dr. Dana Hawkinson, Medical Director of Infection Prevention and Control, joins us now with our COVID numbers and also a look at the monkeypox numbers. And Doc Hawk, we know as concerns of monkeypox grows, as we see those numbers, inch up little by little, the health system has now created a page with more information on how people can access the monkeypox vaccine and just they can learn more about all things monkeypox related. So we put a bit.ly link here on the screen. If you're joining us via podcast, that link is bit.ly/MMU-monkeypox. So utilize that if you need more information on that. But let's get to those counts this morning.
Yeah, and I'd just like to talk about what Dr. Smith was talking about, and that's the fact that, certainly I think he was talking about the guidance. I think it's very important to understand the CDC guidance really focuses on individual risk, and he was talking about when can your child return, are there long-term effects. The best thing you can do to protect your child, to protect the participant, is make sure that they are vaccinated and boosted per recommendations as well. That will significantly reduce their chance of acute problems, but also those long-term side effects as well. So I think that's important. We have to continue to endorse that message. So as far as the COVID count today, we are down, which is good in those active infections, 21 active infections, 3 in the ICU, still 3 on the ventilator as well. Of those ICU patients, 28 in that recovery period. But Jessica, I think the good thing is if you look at the New York Times, the Washington Post, I really think we have peaked as far as reported cases, but also hospitalizations. And I think that is a trend. There is a good trend now of those decreasing numbers. So overall, that is a good thing. In general, as we continue to move into the weekend, understand that, but also understand right now the dominant variant continues to be BA.5 in the United States. Second behind that, probably about 20% or so of isolates are the BA.4. So right now, we haven't really seen any other new variants identified that are of concern here in the United States or around the world, but of course we'll keep monitoring for that. I would suspect that any new surge would involve a new variant that is identified. So,
did we hit the monkeypox numbers?
Yeah.
We did? Okay, sorry. I was looking at community questions, so I just wanted to make sure we got those in today.
So monkeypox, yeah. So still, there are over 14,000 cases in the United States. You can see the numbers for Kansas and Missouri remain quite low, which is always a good thing. The vast majority, so I think it's 5,100, 5,200 are in New York and California, so certainly on the coast we're seeing a lot of cases there. But we do have to understand that it is out there in our community. We know that there are people who are suffering from this disease. So I think the good thing to understand is that the Health and Human Services is rolling out even more vaccine to the states. That will be a good thing. Remember, we are able to increase our doses just because of going from the original route of administration as an injection in the arm to doing that intradermal dose. And that dose is not a lower dose, it is actually the correct dose for that method of administration. So I think that's important for people to understand as well. Don't believe you're getting a lower dose, you're actually getting a correct dose for that route of administration.
Okay, so a study shows there are no benefits of treatment of COVID-19 with ivermectin and other repurposed drugs.
Yeah.
I'm assuming your surprise factor is pretty low on this one.
Yeah, pretty low, but I'm glad we have another really done, well-controlled, randomized controlled trial to support the data, the vast majority of data that is out there. Remember, we all wanted easy, identifiable, cheap drugs for treatment of COVID-19. This did not come to fruition for these particular drugs. We know that there were significantly flawed studies related to that. There were anecdotes that were related to that. There were continued misinformation campaigns around those drugs. This is one more nail in the coffin showing that those drugs do not work. In fact, you have a higher risk of having side effects from those drugs when taking them for that reason than you do for any benefit from that. The other thing is when you are taking those drugs for COVID-19, you are actually taking them out of the hands of people who really need them for their authorized use as well. So I think that's important to remember. This is just one more very strong piece of evidence showing that there is no benefit to taking those drugs if you have COVID-19.
Couple of community questions for you, Dr. Hawkinson. Sarah wants to know, does Paxlovid help prevent the chances for long COVID for those high at risk of severe disease who are up to date, though, with all 4 of their COVID shots?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I don't think we know the correlation of taking Paxlovid with reduction in your chance of getting long COVID. I think the important thing in that question, though, is that you are up to date with your vaccines. We certainly know and have good evidence to support the fact that you have a reduced chance of long COVID symptoms being up to date with your vaccines. But that's a good question about the Paxlovid. I don't think we know that or have a full data set to analyze for that answer.
And Kitty wants to know, will everyone need a booster of the new vaccine for the BA5 and BA6 variant?
Yeah, so for the new boosters that are going to be coming out, the bivalent boosters, again, Moderna and Pfizer will be putting in the original spike, but also a BA4 or a BA5 spike into their new vaccine that should be rolling out this fall. I anticipate everybody will be recommended to have a booster, but we don't know those full recommendations yet. We are still waiting. Hopefully within the next 2 to 4 weeks, we will have recommendations on that, and I don't know when the next committee meeting is that recommends the use of those. So we'll get in touch with Dr. Alt. You know, he's a good member of our health system and also a member of that committee as well. So I do anticipate everybody probably will be recommended to have one, but I don't know that for sure.
Okay, lastly for you this morning on this, First Lady Dr. Jill Biden and Pfizer CEO both testing positive for COVID-19. So it seems like this is very clear that COVID isn't going away anytime soon.
Yeah, I don't think it is, but I think the strides that we've made in the last couple of years, most notably with vaccination, is going to help get us back even further to normal than we are right now. But also we have, early testing. We have plenty of at-home testing supplies. We have early treatment regimens with Paxlovid or the monoclonal antibodies. All these are going to help reduce the chance of hospitalization, severe disease, and death. And that is really what those new CDC guidelines are directed to, especially those at highest risk. And it really all starts with understanding your risk and being up to date with your vaccines.
All right, Alexis is live this morning out at Shawnee Mission East High School. Victor wants to ask Dakota a question, Alexis. Victor says, I had a sports injury as a child and still struggle with pain. Is this common? And how do you heal from a decades-old injury?
Okay, so pain is not common. If the body's in pain, it's telling you something's wrong. So what you need to do is get evaluated, because without knowing the diagnosis, we don't know how to move forward. Once evaluated with your diagnosis, then you can have a treatment plan, whether that be rehab or anything else. So definitely get that evaluated.
Is there hope for someone to recover from a decades-old injury?
Yeah, there is definitely hope, but you want to know what it is. Are we in like the arthritic stage, or are we still good, so that we're able just to work back into a life without pain?
Got it. That's a great question. I have a question for Doug. Go on.
Well, I was just going to say, Anna has a question. She says, my child wants to play tackle football. He's in the 4th grade. I don't really want him in a contact sport this young. Is there a good age to start?
Oh, okay. It's a hot topic question.
Yeah.
So, that is definitely a family decision. There's no perfect age. We're not going to say this is the age you start. It is one of those things where, as a family, you want to sit down, discuss it. It's situational, and it also goes child to child. If you are going to start, I would definitely contact like the athletic trainer at that school or in that group and tell them, hey, this is the first time John's playing contact sports. I just want you to know, and help really educate him on, hurt versus injured.
That's a good question.
Yeah. All right, Alexis, it's all yours.
Well, my question for Doug was about mental health again, because back in the 80s and 90s, when I was in high school, which makes me feel very old, like I should have a cane, we didn't talk about mental health for athletes. And there's a big difference between you feel great after a workout, right? So we say physical activity makes you feel better. But for student athletes and professional athletes, it's a whole different ballgame when it comes to the stress you feel playing at that level. So How do you recognize that? You have systems in place that you were telling me about where Dakota knows what to do if she spots something like that, or they know to reach out to her.
Right. So, yes, we didn't talk about it in the 80s. We certainly, when I went to high school in the 70s, 70s, 80s, 90s, we didn't talk about it in the early 2000s. We probably didn't talk about it until recently. And
was it Simone Biles that brought it to the forefront after the Olympics?
well, we saw that definitely in Simone Biles, but we started seeing that the athletics trainers, Dakota knows her athletes here. She knows that personality right over there. Her biggest giveaway is when that personality starts to change. They start coming in, they're not sleeping right, they're not eating right, they're lethargic. She knows that personality. And so we give them the education to go out there to help recognize that. And so, yes, Simone Biles is a big name in our community itself. Willie Gay came out a year or so and talked about mental health issues and what he was going through. So yeah, we have our professional athletes now talking more about it, which will lead to our collegiate athletes talking more about it, into our high school athletes talking about it. But the greatest gift is having an athletic trainer out there who knows these personalities and goes, that's not you.
Which brings us back to the benefit of having someone like Dakota in the school with this personal relationship.
Correct. Joe's not acting right. Are you picking up on this? Yeah, I kind of noticed that too. And now all of a sudden you have, somebody corroborating what you're thinking, and now you go over and you do, we took a course called QPR over the summertime, all the athletic trainers, question, persuade, and refer. And so you sit down and you question, are you okay? Is everything good? No, I'm not. Well, how about we go get some help? Can we go find some help? And then you refer them off to the behavioral expert. Again, that's not her cup of tea. She's the expert at sports medicine.
Right.
Then she's going to push it on to the person that's supposed to be taking care of it.
You know who to take that concern to help that student get some help. I have a question. This is on behalf of all the parents who are watching. I got a 15-year-old, and if it was up to him, he'd eat nothing but Fruit Loops and Takis for every meal. It's disgusting. So how, as parents, can we possibly stop the kids and help guide them, stop them from eating all that junk, and help guide them towards healthier choices? I mean, at 15, it's really hard to stop your child, your teenager, from getting a hold of all that junk food.
So really utilize your athletic trainer and your coaching staff, because how I try to educate this crew here is whatever you take in is how your body performs. So if you're taking in junk food, you don't have long-term energy and you're depleting your storage. If you want to perform at a higher level, you have to eat at a higher level. That kind of thought process, you want to fuel your body for long-term exercise, strength, conditioning, things like that. When you're taking in sugary processed food, it does not last that long. It's very short, and then you're burnt out and you need more and more, and it never gives you what you want fully. So
how do you handle it if a teenager or a kiddo is loading up on junk food that they get at school, like in the vending machine, or even unhealthy things in the cafeteria? How do you guide them? You can do your best as a parent having all sorts of healthy stuff at home, but what about the stuff they're getting from the schools?
So once again, I really push educating them on what's in your food, look at the ingredients. If you say you can't get the healthy foods from home, but you're getting the processed food at school, try to choose the quote unquote healthier version. So Lay's potato chips, it's potatoes, oil, and salt. Very low, but at the same time gives you the salt that you need. And since school lunches have low sodium, if you're an active athlete, an individual, you need that salt. So we also preach, put a little salt on your food so that your sodium helps you with your hydration.
Really interesting. This is great stuff. Jess, I think what we've all gathered from this is that it's okay to eat Lay's potato chips.
Yes.
Well, the other thing is parents practice what you preach.
Yes.
So.
Yes. That's very good advice. I'm going to send it back to Jess in the studio. I know you have a lot of community questions coming in, and this is such a big topic for parents watching.
Well, the idea, I guess, is to get salt in your diet. We were just talking about pickle juice. Dr. Hawkinson said he used pickle juice. Is that a real thing? Are you giving us bad advice? Because
No,
it
that
actually
was
sounds
the
pretty
old-
good.
It's real advice,
the
but I
old
hate pickle
football.
juice.
Okay.
If you put that in me, I'd rather
So you
be
got to stick
dead.
to the potato chips?
So I like
Pretzels.
Pretzels. You know,
was
they don't
the-
have a lot of fat, a lot of salt. Chocolate milk has been proven to be a good supplement because
Okay.
it's high in protein.
Just don't overdo
Got
it.
a little bit carbohydrate. So there's a lot of ways that you can find out in that child, what do you like? Fruit Loops, I'm not going to pick on them, but it's probably not the best, very high sugar.
The Fruit Loop people aren't watching.
Yeah,
You can say it.
So we want carbohydrate, we want protein. Protein is very important, but some people are on too high a protein diet. They think it's all about protein to build muscle. It's a balanced diet. So yes, if Dana likes pickle juice, I'll let him have the pickle juice.
Okay.
I'll avoid that and I'll eat my pretzels.
I like it. Okay. Alexis was telling us yesterday about her injury. She was a swimmer and her shoulders, and it just kind of like, I don't think she got the proper, care that she needed back then. And I know you were talking about how you ran and you had some injuries, right?
Yeah,
Growing up, what were they?
Right. We had all kinds of overuse injuries. Back then, we had x-ray to be able to evaluate leg pain. So it was either shin splints or you were fine or you weren't tough
Just
enough.
pick from the list.
So in fact, that's why I'm in the profession I'm in, because the medical advice I got was stop running. In fact, they held me out of running my 8th grade year, 1 year where I couldn't run, and all I had was a little overused kneecap problem. And to look back at that, think I missed a whole year of my life. And I tell you, that was hard on me to not be able to do the sport that I loved. So we have so many better ways. Now, one of the things I think that we've gotten into is we've almost gotten too good at what we do. Where as soon as someone gets a little ache, they think of the worst. They go to Dr. Google and they find their diagnosis, which is the zebra diagnosis. It could be a tumor. Maybe it could be a tumor, but that'd be very unlikely. So I think that back to Alexis, your comment about swimmers. Yeah, swimmers have shoulder problems. But if we do a good sports physical on them and we identify some things that a swimmer could run into, we can potentially prevent that. We see that with baseball. Dr. Vincent Key is our head orthopedic surgeon for the Kansas City Royals. I guarantee you by the time they make the Royals, they better get over some of the things that they had when they were young. So if I'm doing a sports physical on a thrower and I see a really tight shoulder, I'm going to say, hey, we got to get this taken care of before you start trying to fire some fastballs and learn that curveball.
Sure.
So yeah, there are a lot of things that are preventable. And to dovetail in what the one person asked about, I've had an old injury many years ago. Now I'm still having pain. Dakota hit it on the head. They need an evaluation. Many times that post-traumatic pain that's gone on for a while, many times is arthritis.
So it's never too late to look into it,
No,
right?
no,
Don't
heavens
just keep
no,
letting it go.
no. You don't want to just put off something, and if it's something that we can evaluate soon and get them in the right pathway of treatment, we might prevent that arthritic joint from becoming even more severe. So yeah, we have plenty of health care professionals that are trained in this area that can get them on the right course. The people that I see in the office are not all the elite athletes. I'm seeing a lot of weekend warriors, a lot of folks that are much older that just want to walk for their exercise
Stay
and
active,
fitness.
yeah.
And I say, boy, let's get you moving. Let's get you moving. We'll help you.
A last question is from Ruth Ellen, and I'm going to give it to Dakota, Alexis. This is for Dakota. Can she hear that okay? Hi, Dakota. Okay, so Ruth Ellen wants to know, how do the trainers work with the academic side for the athletes? How do you kind of help find that balance?
So the question is, how do you find that balance with the academic side and the teachers working with the players and the trainers and coaches?
So for being in the school setting, for me, I don't call them out of class. The only time that kids can get out of class to see me to do rehab or anything like that, they have to have all their grades up to C or higher. That's my standard. And then they can't have any attendance issues that day. So, that trying to keep them focused on their schoolwork. And then when they come to me and they just feel so overwhelmed with school and athletics, we really have that mental health talk about maybe today we should focus on what we can control. And right now we're in practice for an hour and a half. We can do that, and then we're going to go home, we're going to eat, we're going to shower, and then we're going to focus on homework and do as much as we can. They also have what's called seminar here, where it's academic work time. During those times, it's 2 times a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays. Make sure they get with that teacher and work with their, current project. So I really just break down and we talk through what's the best avenue for them so that they have the confidence to move forward.
I have a question for Dakota. Jess, do you mind if I ask a question here?
Please do.
I had heard Dr. Smith saying that he had to stop running for a little bit. Would you actually advise a student athlete to stop their sport for a bit if they're injured? Because that sounds so foreign to me from a different generation. It was not an option to stop. That would have been seen as like quitting or weak or letting down the team. I would have been embarrassed to stop swimming.
So we usually try not to say the word stop. We do modified practice or modified activity. Also, this goes on, we're working with the doctors as well, especially with our health system. If the doctors are like, hey, they have to sit out for some time, perfectly fine. What can we do to keep them involved with their sport though, so that they don't feel ostracized and feel alone? So if they are completely out because the doctors pulled them out, how can we make them, swim? Okay, can you be the timer? Can you help with time trials? Can you help the dive coach with scoring? Things like that, so that they still are there at practice, involved, and they don't feel like they're missing out. There are things that we can do to help modify and work around the injury for those athletes.
It's interesting. The level of awareness is so much greater now than it was in years past.
Alexis, we're going to wrap up here, but Dr. Smith, I did want to ask you, because I remember when I grew up, I thought that was great that you would tie. You got to keep your grades up if you wanted to stay in your sport. But now recognizing the mental health behind, now you got to keep up your grades, and now you got to stay out on the field, and you've got to perform at such a high level on both sides. So what's the good, bad, and the ugly with all that?
Yeah, boy, I tell you, there's good, and thank you, Dakota, for mentioning. I say academics comes first, and obviously some students are just not really academicians, but they still need to keep the grades up before they can participate, or at least do some of the things like get pulled out of class. But you know what? I do think there's a lot of pressure on student athletes. It's hard for me to watch the only one that gets the awards or the winners, those that are really successful, when you got all these others working just as hard. They just don't maybe have the gift of that sport, and yet they want to participate, but they're just not that good. So we have to be careful on how hard we push, and I'm picking on parents. I've been a parent of 4 children now, 2 grandsons. And I hope that my wife and I balanced it out. So we encouraged. I used to say, let's find things that you like to do and do them. And yet don't just quit in the middle of it. I use the term, you never quit. You can retire from something. But if you retire from something, you're going to add something else to do. And let's find something you enjoy. We want these athletics and activities to be enjoyable. There's so much benefit to be involved with sports and other activities. But boy, if the percentage of students that go on to be a Patrick Mahomes or a Brady Singer pitching for the Royals or a Simone Biles is exceedingly small. My dream was to be Jim Ryan and go to the Olympics and win a gold medal. And I realized, by high school, you know what, it's not going to happen.
And here you are sitting with me.
Well, I know, and I guess as I tell my kids, I suppose if I really had pushed it, maybe I could have been a really good basketball player or something. But the reality is, we got to balance out their lives, help them realize that a gold medal or a trophy or a state championship or an NCAA championship or a gold medal in the Olympics, that's all great. But very few are going to reach that level. Right. And it's okay to do things, try things, and be active. It's so important for mental health, physical health, being involved with social peers and so forth. So,
well, hopefully this makes you feel good. One of our viewers said that Dr. Smith is one of the best doctors around.
Oh,
so
man.
Hopefully that feels better than being out on the basketball court.
That humbles me. It does not give me. I tell you, I really enjoy what I do, working with people to be active. And I use this old saying that, you know what, if water stops moving and gets stagnant, it stinks. Yeah. And my job is to keep people moving. They may not be a roaring river with whitecaps and everything in rapids, but if they're moving down that canal, or they're moving, and hopefully that translates into a lot of positive things for them. So, yeah.
Great message. We went really long today, but I just felt it was worth it. I love having you in here with us. You always have great things to share, and it's just such a really important topic as we head back to school. So I want to get our final thoughts. Alexis, I'm going to start in the weight room with you and your guests.
All right, let's start with Doug as we wrap up this special program. What are your final thoughts, and what would be the most important message to parents who are watching?
Well, I think the important message is is be aware of what's going on with your kids. And a lot of times, myself included, I have a now almost 26-year-old, but she was a competitive softball pitcher. And every year I irritated her because I said, do you still want to do this? Do you like doing this? Is this still fun for you? Dad, will you quit asking me that? You ask me that every year. Yes, I love this. Go talk to your kids. Don't get away from them. Don't assume things because they may be hiding things that you don't know. It's right there in front of you, but it's kind of like parents watch them grow up. Grandparents see them every now and then and go, oh my gosh, look at this. And so little subtle things that are right in front of parents can be missed. And so talk to your kids, always talk to your kids. You know, if there's an issue, talk to the people that are around them. Talk to the athletic trainer, talk to the coach, you know, talk to the counselor. That way we prevent something catastrophic happening, you know, mentally-wise.
Dakota, what about you?
I would say overall, use your athletic trainer. We're here to protect and help your child, you know, move forward. So if you have any questions, reach out to us. If when we come up to you, don't, you know, it's not the end of the world. We just sometimes have concerns that, like, have you seen this? You know, have you noticed this at home? How can we help you? We're really just another tool in the parents' toolbox. And we have a great connection with our doctors, so we see them here. We're able to communicate with the doctors at the hospital so that your child's getting the best care that they can get.
And what a great reminder from Doug to ask your child, are you still having fun?
Yeah.
It's such a basic question, but so important for them to still be having fun in what they're doing.
Right.
Jess, back to you.
All right, Alexis, thanks so much for being out there live with us today. Dr. Smith, I want to get your final thoughts, but I have to say, Ruth Ellen, one of our viewers, good morning to you. She said, trophies get dusty, education lasts forever.
I love it. I love it. Yeah. Good.
Final thoughts from you today.
Yeah, you know, I'm glad we're back to activity. COVID is not gone. I mean, Dr. Hawkinson obviously brought up a lot of that. And yeah, what COVID did was brought to us really an awareness of how we function in society, in our small groups, in our families, in our own personal lives. And I think that as we move forward and hopefully come out the other side of this, we can remember that let's not just be selfish and look at ourselves. Let's look at those around us. So mental health is going to be the real focus this year, in my opinion, in sports medicine. That we need to be aware of what could be impacting a student athlete, and not just an athlete, but a student. You know, remember, we talk about the athletes we're dealing with, but I care just as much about the students in these schools.
And the person that grows up.
And the person, and their parents that are going through a lot, and our nation that's going through a lot. So let's use sports as a real positive thing in people's lives, and let's not let it drag students down or parents down. Be active. We got a great team. It's a privilege for me to be part of this sports medicine team. It's a privilege to be on the studio today and with experts like Dana and the whole group that we have here at KU Health System. So thank you.
Well, you're one of my favorites, so
No,
thanks
thank
for
you.
being with us. Have a great weekend. Dr. Hawkinson, final thoughts from you.
I was going to thank you, David, and everybody you work with, and everybody in the high schools and middle schools and elementary schools, the counselors, the teachers, the administrators, of course, those people that we've heard from today, the athletic coaches and trainers just trying to work every day to keep our children safe. So thank you to all of you.
All right, go pour yourself a glass of warm pickle juice.
Well, a pickle juice before, and maybe an extra dirty martini after.
There
the
you
event.
go.
Water.
Going right
In
into the
moderation,
weekend.
of course.
Everything in moderation. All right. Thank you to all of our guests today. Thank you so much for being with us today. Have a fantastic weekend. We'll see you back here Monday. That loss of smell might not be COVID. A new study finds it could be a warning sign of dementia. I'm Jessica Lovell. More than 6 million Americans have Alzheimer's. From the latest research to how the flu vaccine is helping with memory loss. That's Monday at 8.
Subscribe to our morning medical update and open mics with Dr. Stites podcasts. Now, everywhere podcasts are available.